I didn't know if this guy cared whether or not I fooled around with somebody. But I also know that I didn't feel good cheating on him. And I also knew that even if I did and then tried to keep it a secret, I'm incapable of doing that. Hi, this is Mike Balaban, here with another episode of BAMMER Tales. Before I go any further, let me just apologize if my voice is a little husky today. It's because I'm just recently getting over an episode of COVID. And secondly, if you haven't already subscribed to this YouTube page, BAMMER 47, please do so now. And when you get a chance, please check out my podcast interview series, BAMMER and Me, which is available on almost any podcast channel. There, I interview remarkable and extraordinary LGBTQ people and our allies around the world. Thank you. Today, I'd like to focus on my involvement with nonprofits, particularly LGBTQ nonprofits, on the boards of directors of several organizations over the last 27 years. For me, volunteering on a board for a nonprofit whose mission I believe in is one of the most rewarding experiences that I've ever had. And that's why I keep repeatedly doing it with different organizations. And I want to tell you that it's something that is extremely memorable, and you become very passionate about it if you decide to do it. In 1996, a friend had created GLSEN, the Gay, Lesbian, and Straight Education Network, which was focused on the U.S. educational system, in particular high schools and junior high schools, and trying to make sure that our education system here was safe for all children, particularly LGBTQ youth, that no bullying was taking place, that there were safe spaces where they could be if they needed to. And also, we began overseeing and now oversee more than 5,000 gay-straight alliances in those institutions around the United States. But at that time, it was a rather small organization. I joined its founding board at the request of the guy who started it. And for 9 years, I served there. I was the head of the development and fundraising effort, and I eventually became vice chairman. Now, around 2000, in my role as development chair, I learned of someone who was very connected with people at the U.S. State Department and in the government in Havana, Cuba. And we were able to get a very rare permission from the U.S. government to legally take some of our donors to Havana, Cuba for 5 days and on an educational basis show them that country. As you might imagine, many people wanted to visit Cuba and not many were able to. If you didn't have Cuban heritage and hadn't emigrated from Cuba, you were not allowed legally by the U.S. to go there. So we ended up getting about 35 fairly well-off donors who signed up for this program. It's pretty expensive. It was about $3,500 for 5 days. And we took them there. And the program involved a lot of education. We went to high schools and junior high schools. We went to factories. We visited a children's ballet school. And we got to eat dinners in paladares, which are private restaurants in the homes of local Cubans. And then one evening, near the end of the 5 days, after we had attended a paladares, we were in our two vans going back to the hotel we were staying in, and the driver stopped on a corner and pointed out the 200 or 300 people assembled in this open block on our right were in fact Cuban LGBTQ people who, under a government where it was illegal to be homosexual, had very few places to hang out, and this is one place where they were not bothered. So every night, groups would meet there, and in the course of the evening, the word would privately circulate where the party of that night was going to be, and people would get in their cars and form a caravan and drive out to that address, and the rest of the evening would be dedicated to that party. So we drive up, we're in our van, and we were the first ever organized LGBT group to be able to go to Cuba. We didn't know that at the time. But it turns out those gays on that corner had heard that an American gay group was coming. So when they saw our vans drive up, they thought it was us. and they surrounded our vehicle, dozens of them, pressing through the windows of the van saying, "Hey, what's your name? I'm so-and-so. You're really cute." It was a little bit intimidating. Kind of reminded me of that scene in Suddenly Last Summer with Elizabeth Taylor and Montgomery Clift.
It was a one-piece bathing suit made of something white. The water made it transparent. He just grabbed me by the hand and dragged me into the water. I came out looking nude.
Where at the end, Montgomery Clift is swallowed by a group of Italian youth, and the implication was that they were cannibalizing him. That wasn't happening here. We had the option to go back to the hotel or to get out there, and half of us, the single ones, got out there. The coupled ones mostly went back to their hotel. When we got onto the corner there and joined the rest of the group, they were very friendly. There was nothing to be frightened of. We mingled and socialized. The only thing in that area, aside from people, were a couple of freezers and refrigerators with very long extension cords to a power source where beer and other drinks were kept refrigerated. And those drinks cost about $2 each, which is a pittance for an American, but was a fortune in the local Cuban currency. And so most of us obviously bought drinks for the new Cuban friends. And some of us were immediately connected and attracted to and found attraction back from some of the locals. So those pairs would go off to what are called love hotels. That is, motels where you rent by the hour, because the Cubans all lived with their families and couldn't bring anybody home. And we were in a foreign hotel where you were not allowed to bring locals up to your room. So the only place they could get together and hook up was in these short-term hotels. I ended up meeting someone who was very handsome, and I found him extremely attractive. He responded to me as well. And it was clear that there was an opportunity to go off with him if I wanted. But I had just begun dating at New Year's, and this was May 2001. On New Year's 2001, I had met in Fort Lauderdale and started dating long distance the guy who would eventually become my partner of a dozen years or so. And at that point, he wasn't able to afford the trip to Cuba, so I went alone. But he and I had visited each other in our different cities and spent a week with each other, and that was the full extent of our involvement. It was not clear if it was going to continue. It was not clear if monogamy was an issue. If I didn't know if this guy cared whether or not I fooled around with somebody. But I also know that I didn't feel good cheating on him. And I also knew that even if I did and then tried to keep it a secret, I'm incapable of doing that. He would immediately see on my face my emotions, that I felt conflicted about something, and he would ask what that was, and I would have to tell him the truth. So when the opportunity arose to go off with Vincent to a motel, I had to explain to him the situation, tell him I found them adorable. Any other time I would love to, but I couldn't. And he accepted it, and we hung out the rest of the evening. And then the next day, several of us in the group, maybe a half dozen to a dozen, snuck away from the tour program on our only half day, doing something different. And we took taxis to the gay beach. I think it's called Mi Cayito, outside of Havana, about a half hour, and spent the morning and early afternoon, frolicking in the waves and hanging out and getting sun. And Vincent joined me there, and he and I were in the water, splashing each other and arms around each other's neck and playing a little bit of grab crotch and grab butt, doing everything but have sex. It was so much fun, and I have such a fond memory and photos, which I'll show, but we didn't hook up. And we exchanged numbers. We remained in contact for about a year after I got back to the States. But Vincent, unlike all the rest of the locals that evening, didn't live in Cuba. He had managed to emigrate legally somehow to Amsterdam and was back visiting his family. And at the end of his week or so visit with the family, he told them he was flying back to Amsterdam, when in truth, he got a hotel room for a night or two, just so he could have fun and fool around. So I could have gone to his hotel with him easily, had I been able and willing. So that was it. The trip to Cuba was extremely productive. We were able to persuade donors who spent 5 days with us about our mission and its importance, and some of them would end up giving $100,000 to $200,000 a year out of family foundations to the cause. And then 4 or 5 other people who were in that group got so enamored of us that they ended up vying for and becoming members of our board as well. So if you're in a nonprofit and you organize a trip like this, it can be a great way to raise money and to find new board donors. So this has been an episode of me trying to describe to you what it's like to be involved philanthropically with an organization where you give your time and money. You don't get paid to be on those boards. You do it for free, and you're expected to give money as well. But it feels wonderful. And also how it can lead to things like this trip to Cuba, where I saw a country which most Americans can't see and got to meet a gorgeous guy, if only for one evening and one day. Thanks for listening. Mike Balaban, BAMMER Tales.